class, I want y'all to listen up. Faith is going to give her presentation today. Listen to what she has to say, be respectful, take notes. You might have a pop quiz afterwards. Faith, the floor is yours.
Alrighty, you guys. So today I'm going to tell you guys about the book that I read. And the book that I read is called The Short and Tragic Life of Robert Peace by Jeff Hobbs. And I just want you to think about that title for a second and what it means. Obviously, we know that there's something short and tragic about his life, so just think about that. Alright, so I'm going to start off with Jeff Hobbs. He was born on April 8, 1980 in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, and in the book he said it was in an 18th century farmhouse on 15 acres of rolling rural hills. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what he lived at. He attended private school for most of all of his life, and he ran track at those schools as a national caliber hurdler. That's what he calls himself. He has 4 siblings, 2 brothers and sisters, and his two older siblings, I know for sure, went to Yale, and I think so his father did also. Jeff went from 1998 to 2002, which is where he met Robert Peace. And that's the book and a picture of him. Alright, also, after Jeff graduated in 2002, with a BA in English Language and Literature, he decided to go work for a nonprofit. Well, he went to live in Africa first for a little while, and then he worked for a nonprofit in Africa it was an environmental organization. He was writing up papers for them, I think. And then he met his wife, Rebecca, in 2005, and he published his first book, The Tourist, in 2008. And then after 2008, he kind of had a rough start, and then tragedy struck on May 18, 2011, and his roommate from college, Robert Peace, was murdered in Newark, New Jersey. And from that, he wrote the book, The Short and Tragic Life of Robert Peace in 2015. Alright, so this book has a lot of information, so I'm going to give you guys a timeline to kind of make it a little bit shorter. Alright, so this is Robert Peace's life. In 1980, he was born as Robert Deshaun Peace to his mother, Jackie Peace, and Robert Skeet Douglas. That's what his dad's name is. This is a picture of his mother and him at Christmas one year, I believe, and that was in 1980. In 1987, his father was arrested for the murder of Estella and Charlene Moore. He murdered them in their apartment. He lived across the hallway from them, and he was convicted of that like the next morning, I believe. In 1990, Rob enters the 4th grade at Mount Carmel Elementary School, and also in that same year, Skeet receives a life sentence in Trenton State Prison for those murders, which Rob did not believe that he committed after he found out, but that's a whole other story about Skeet and not Rob. In 1994, Rob started at St. Benedict's, which is his high school. It was an all-boys high school where he played water polo, and he met the friar, Evan Leahy, I believe, and the Burger Boys, which was his group of friends that he kind of made it through high school with, and he tutored them through high school because he was extremely smart, Robert Peace. In 1998, that got bigger than I thought, Rob graduated from St. Benedict's, 3rd in his class, after a man named Charles Crawley came up to him at his one of the graduation ceremonies. It wasn't the one where he graduated from. He came up and he gave him a blank check to pay for him to go to college anywhere he wanted to. And after his mom tried to send him to Johns Hopkins, the letter was sent in too late. She couldn't get off of work in time to go to send his application into Johns Hopkins. So he decided on Yale because he loved his mother and he didn't get mad at his mom or anything. He just decided to go to Yale. After that. In 2002, Rob graduated from Yale in molecular biophysics and biochemistry, which is extremely rare, even at Yale. Here, he began to sell drugs as he attended college. By the time he was done with college, he had raised about $100,000 from selling drugs out of his room and at various other places around campus. And that's him graduating. Alright, so after he graduated, he went to Rio. Rob loved to travel. That is exactly where he wanted to go. So he went to Rio, and he left his money with his uncle Carl, which was his dad's best friend. And so while he's in Rio, Carl steals his money from him, the $100,000 that he had raised from buying drugs or selling drugs in college. And so he decides to start teaching at St. Benedict's, which is where he went to school. Also, there was a little time lapse in between here, but in 2006, his father, Skeet, died from brain cancer. And then in 2007, he left teaching. He stopped teaching at St. Benedict's because of, he fought with the children a lot. He was very aggressive in the way that he acted with his students sometimes, and it just kind of got out of hand. So he stopped teaching, and then the very next day, he went to work at Continental Airlines as a baggage worker, so he could travel more often because they could travel for free. And then in 2010, he was fired from the airline, and he started to sell more and more drugs that he had made himself. He came up with a drug called sour diesel. And in 2010, after he quit, he really got into it, and he was going to sell more so he could do other things besides sell drugs. But he ended up dying in his best friend Curtis Gamble's basement on May the 18th, 2011. That's where he died. All right. So now I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about Jeff Hobbs today currently after he's written the book. After he wrote the book, he decided to go talk to high school and college students about Robert Peace's life and about, he didn't want to say, most people would read this book and say, don't do drugs. That's the main message that they want to go tell about. Jeff, on the other hand, he really wanted to talk about friendships. He thought that friendships were the most important thing, and he felt that Rob didn't have the right amount of friendships to save him from what happened in the basement. So what is the message? I know this is really long, so I'm going to kind of shorten it. Okay, so Rob was an only child, and he did not have any siblings to put his problems onto. His mother was working very hard. She worked 2 jobs through high school, and because she went to private school, it was about $200 a month. And so he had to solve his own problems. He did not have really anybody to go through his problems with. And when he did find friends, his friends didn't really dig deep in that sense. They really just kind of lived on the outside. Rob didn't share family life with them very often, and he kind of kept things to himself. Also, Jeff and a lot of his friends from Yale, when they went to Rob's funeral, they realized that there were an enormous amount of people at this funeral. But every person that was at this funeral only knew certain pieces of Rob's life. Everyone had a part that made up his whole, and no one knew exactly what Rob was doing at all times. Like, some may have knew that he was doing drugs. Some knew that he was being a family friend to these people. Some knew his mother didn't even know that he was selling drugs for a long time. She suspected, but she never knew for sure. So that's basically the message, just to get deeper. And there was also a message about other people can read this book and learn what some of the symptoms of an at-risk student may be. They can learn that rather than just give financial help, emotional help is also needed to nurture young men with fathers gone too soon. So it's important to not only have the financial help, but emotional help that can help these children to thrive in their age that they don't have people to help them. Okay, so I talked about a critical perspective. So obviously Jeff Hobbs is a white, privileged person who went to Yale. And personally, I didn't believe that he did a really good job writing this book in the perspective of Rob's family and Rob's friends, so it didn't exactly seem like he had too much of an outside perspective. But I could see where Jeff is not the expert in poverty or race issues, and that does come up a lot in this book, and I feel like that would be definitely a critical perspective of Jeff Hobbs. Also, he's not an educational theorist. Jeff is a writer. And so it really can't be backed up much by his expertise in an educational field. Also, Rob was not a typical student. He was very, very, very smart, and he still fell prey to the drugs in his area. And so this book, some students could look at this book and think, well, this doesn't relate to me, I'm not this smart. And it can be a critical perspective in ways. So some young students may not connect to that. All right. So how does Rob's life translate to the classroom. So Rob was actually a teacher for a while, and although my content is math, he excelled at science. But some of the things that he did do in the classroom did open my eyes a little bit. So in college, Rob looks at a stereo and says to Jeff, me, I look at things and want to figure it out, like take it apart, see what's inside, know how it works, learn the science behind it. And I feel like that's important in any classroom. Instead of just throwing facts at someone, you want to be able to learn what's behind it and learn how it connects. Also, Jeff comments in the book that memorization had never been the goal for him. Understanding had always been the goal. And he took the same approach with his students. He always wanted to get deep and understand his students in a way that he could help them and understand them and connect with them on a deeper level. Although Rob wasn't the best teacher, he connected with his students. As a coach, he said to a student who was disinterested in water polo, if you go into something, you make it hard, you better make it hard, otherwise what's the point? He also followed that up with, look, anything you do, if it isn't hard, it isn't doing anything for you, so you're better off not doing it, use your time somewhere else. And so even though I feel like that may have shown some people that they just quit, I feel like Rob was saying more like, you're here, so let's make it hard, let's do it, let's put all our effort into it, and let's get this done. So, okay, what does Rob's story have to do with math? Okay, so first off, math is focused and centered around a method that is very useful in many students' lives that they believe they will never use. Does anybody know what that method is? Problem solving. Problem solving. That's exactly right. So problem solving is typically defined as the process of finding solutions to difficult or complex issues. So Rob spent his whole life problem solving, but he problem solved in a way that wasn't always the best. It was the easiest. He problem solved by making money by selling drugs. Anytime he got into a field or started teaching anywhere, he just solved his problems. So rather than, as a math teacher, I feel I should teach more than just the quickest and easiest answer to the solution. Problems in real life are much more complicated than what we teach in the classroom, and I feel that the classroom should reflect that. I feel like that, let me move on. Like Joe Bowler, and what math got to do with it, I strongly believe that more real-world situations need to be brought into the classroom. And division by ability will not solve those problems. I feel like they need to be put together so their different abilities can counteract. So what do I do? So we've got numbers and operations. So say a student doesn't understand why they do numbers and operations. You can calculate the prices per item for substances found in a grocery store or elsewhere, and you can use measurement here, whether with ounces or gallons or quarts or pints, and you can use fractions also to find out how much you get per ounce, and I'll have a picture of it on the next slide. In geometry, you can build your own home, calculate the perimeter area fraction from one room to the other, and you can use all of these skills in real life. In algebra, you use the Pythagorean theorem to calculate height or distance, equation to find out the height of a tree or the length of the wall in a home, you can use that too. And then you have data analysis and probability, and you use statistics and data analysis to get them interested. Things like statistics for college, injuries in football. I know that, I would love to hear that, but I put this picture on there. It said, how do you divide 17 potatoes between 4 people? You mash them. Alright, so this is Chick-fil-A. Everybody likes Chick-fil-A. And so you would have your total and you pay with that, and that would be your change, and that would be a real life way. You have your Pythagorean theorem with a mountain. You have your geometry with a house. You have your temperatures below zero, because some people never look at below temperatures and think, well, I'm going to use that. This is geometry in real life. You have points, you have push pins, off of a chair spike, you have a line segment, which is like a space bar or a door handle or a pencil, just all kind of real stuff. And then this is ounces. You have 10.99 and 100 ounces, and you can show how much you get per ounce with money and things like that. And that just shows real life ways that people don't normally show their students. And so I put a statistics on here. Like father, like son. Okay, so most importantly, I want my student to not only focus on solving the problem, but to focus their efforts on a goal. Rob, to me, never seemed like he had a goal. He always just wanted to solve his problems in the best way possible, and he never focused on, oh, hey, I want to be a teacher. Oh, hey, I want to be a scientist. He just kind of did what he thought he should do. And so the U.S. Census shows that 22% of sons that had their father present during their teenage years were more